So, welcome to another episode of the Bill Chun Show. I'm getting really comfortable talking about what has happened to me in past 40 some years. So, I wanted to start with an amazing story. I was going through the episodes and reading some of the comments, and I came across a name, and I realized, could this be that Uncle Jim from Chillicothe, Missouri? So I messaged this gentleman, and he said, yes, it is one and the same. So here's the story. Uncle Jim, stationed in South Korea, meets one of my aunties, gets married, and they come back to United States, Missouri to be exact. And starting early 70s, one by one, Chuns immigrate to United States. Initially, my grandparents, then my father and us. This was in 1974. I last saw him in April of 1974. And I remember him as being a gentle, quiet, reserved, tall American. And I remember visiting him at his work at a grocery store. And we stayed about a week. Fast forward, I texted with him just today, 46 years later. How cool is that? Uncle Jim and dear auntie, if you get a chance to watch this, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to come to this amazing country. I can't imagine what my life would have been like had I stayed in Korea. Maybe I would have been just like my father, maybe same area. Maybe I would have dealt with auto parts as well, but I don't want to imagine that because it's been a great ride so far. So thank you. As soon as this pandemic crisis is over and I don't have to be quarantined for 2 weeks after I travel, I will come and visit you in Washington. Thinking about you, Uncle Jim, and my dear aunt, I was really moved by my time in 1970s, particularly 74, 75. Again, kind of walk you back. We came here in the spring of 74, eventually settled in small town outside of Cincinnati called Loveland. Imagine 2 bedrooms with 13 people. My parents, myself, 2 brothers, my grandparents, my uncle with his wife and 3 little daughters, and another uncle. 13 of us. And I'm not sure if I ever really felt like it was too small for all of us to live, because all I care about was the fact that we had indoor plumbing. Yes, toilet. That's all I care about, I think, for the most of my life. Outdoor, outhouse versus indoor plumbing. Anyways, that was life to be. But one thing that I hadn't mentioned before, and this topic may be disturbing for some people, but it's about domestic violence. So for the first 12 years of my life, perhaps because of what my father did for a living, domestic violence was something that I witnessed over and over. But I think being the country that it was post-Korean War, 60s and 70s, maybe my mom really felt there was no way out. Maybe that is why she spent everything she had, used every resource to get us to the United States. Maybe her reason for coming to the United States was to escape that. But initially, she did not. How is it possible that when 13 people live in a 2-bedroom apartment, that an adult is beaten by another adult without police ever being called, without any neighbors ever interfering, without any grown-ups in that small apartment ever stopping my father? It's not imaginable, but it happened in the spring of 1975. For almost a month, my mother was bedridden. Now that I'm a physician, I think she probably had a few rib fractures because I recall the way she had to take shallow breath. I cannot imagine being that person. Credit to my mother. At that young age of 31, with no formal education, still many barriers to this country, the culture, the language, lack of money and support, she packed a few things and then she left. She left her marriage behind. I think when my mother left, my father, when we ran away, I think that was the end of my father's American dream. For next 30 years, my father really did not move up. I think about this America the way I see it because I'm an optimist. That glass is half full, not half empty. With hard work, persistence, and a bit of luck, maybe some of you would call that divine intervention, but for me, a little bit of luck, you make something of yourself. But that did not happen to my father. The picture behind me, my portrait from Naval Academy when I was a plebe in 1980, that very picture I delivered to my father when he was living at a mobile home. And the same picture I picked up 30 years later after he died. He died in the same mobile home. And for 30 years after my mother left him, I think he struggled. He struggled because, not only because his marriage was over, but he lost a partner who was very resourceful, resilient. And, you know, his last job before he died, he worked at a small school cafeteria, which is a fine job, but he was never able to really provide for his kids. I never looked to him for anything. I mean, I've been married and divorced a few times. I can tell you that he was never at any of my weddings. He was never at birth of any of my kids. He never attended any of my graduation. He was never at any of my celebrations. In fact, when he died, 3 days I was at his bedside after he became comatose after chemotherapy. I realized those hours I stayed with him in those 3 days, in hours, probably were more than all the hours, all the time I spent with him after we left him in 1975. And unlike my mother, he probably regretted leaving Korea behind. At least when he was in Korea, he was surrounded by women, booze, lots of excitement. He was always dressed very sharp, always in ties. And to live your life working in a cafeteria, in an elementary school, in a small town outside of Cincinnati for 30 years, I'm sure he was not in a good place. In contrast, when my mother left my father, it was the beginning of American dream. My mother, God bless her heart, she may be 5 feet with high heels, small Spitfire, 31, she left with her little boys. And I remember that in the beginning, I remember we went to a grocery store one time and she was buying grocery and I was watching her paying for grocery and I recall, wow, that doesn't look like money. What is she paying with? And when we got home, I asked Mom, how did you pay for the grocery? And she had mentioned food stamp. Even at that age, I was so ashamed that I don't think I ate dinner. But Later on, I realized my mother had to do what she had to do. What choice did she have? With no support system. In 70s, there was no social support. There was no social service you could call. There was no cell phone. We didn't have any relatives or friends. And she got a job in a factory. She worked her butt off. A year later, we moved to Dayton, and she worked. Boy, could my mother work. She worked many jobs. She would work at a Chinese restaurant. She would also alter clothes for neighbors. And I remember some people were paying like in quarters, but she did it anyway. And until I left high school, yes, we lived in public housing, but soon after, somehow she saved enough money to buy her very first house. That's American dream. And then later on, without any formal education, my mother would open a Chinese restaurant. People say, wow, I thought you were Korean. What are you doing with Chinese restaurant? Well, you know what? You can't really make money with Korean restaurant anywhere. But go anywhere in this country, you will find the Chinese restaurant. And my mother had her first Chinese restaurant. And then after a few years, she flipped it. And then she opened another one. And she closed the restaurant one day a year. And she continued the business for the longest time. When I came to Boston, and I would work my shift as a resident, and my hours were long. It was over 100 hours a week. And every few months, I would go home, and I would visit my mother at a restaurant, and she would give me the best hug. And then she would say, Bill, now I go clean those tables. And they bring those dishes in the kitchen. I said, Jim, and a cricket mother, I just work hours just to come and see you. Now you want me to work? And she would say, I'm working. Of course you are. And of course, I would do it. This country, for someone like my mother, hard work, persistence, and a little bit of luck. My mother really is that American dream. And she made sure her kids got to pursue each one's own dream. And I think about what our lives would have been like had my father changed a bit. Maybe he would have understood that in America you can't really beat up people. Had my parents stayed together in 75, maybe instead of one restaurant, maybe they would have owned many restaurants. Maybe I would still be in Ohio. But, you know, that's just life. It wasn't meant to be. So, as much as I talk about how great this country is, and it is, there's no lack of pain. There's no lack of tear. It's good, bad, and ugly. And for someone like my mother, as I often ask her, why did you want to come here? And she would say, well, for you kids. But maybe it was that. But also she knew that in Korea, she would have never escaped someone like my father. Domestic violence is prevalent everywhere. It's very common in immigrant communities, especially newly arrived immigrants, I'm sure, due to frustration for men, language barriers, economic barriers. It's hard. It's not something that people talk about, but it is very prevalent. If any of you are watching this and know someone who is in the midst of this kind of unfortunate situation, please reach out to me, because no matter where you are, I will do my best to find you help. So tonight, I'm going to bring Katy Fernandez. So Katy's not on yet, but let me introduce you, Kati. Kati is. This is a good time to talk about my pet project, Doc and Dula. So I met Kati about a month ago. Doc and Dula is a private Facebook group that I started last year. And it's a group that I really felt was needed. Even in Boston, Boston being a mecca of medicine, even here, there's such a shortage of resource for women, especially pregnant women. So Doc and Dula is community of healthcare professionals where we are intent on educating and empowering women related to pregnancy. Doula, in case some of you may not be familiar with, the term doula, it really applies to lay person, so non-medical person whose job is to support women during labor and delivery, so it is a positive experience. There's nothing like birth of your child, nothing. And that process should be taking place in a peaceful, harmonious, positive environment. And I believe that the role of doula is very much needed. So this was started last year. We now have physicians like myself, pediatrician, experts including childbirth educators, physical therapist, nutritionist, chiropractor, acupuncturist, and the list is growing. And it's been a really rewarding project because every day we are reminded why we're doing what we're doing. Healthcare in this country, I must say, is a shit show, as I often refer to. No business transaction will consumers be abused like in healthcare. Consumers, as I say, patients are consumers. There's monetary exchange for service. And even in Boston, there's a huge room for improvement. Imagine Massachusetts being a state with one of the highest concentration of physicians. You go to a place like Mississippi or Alabama, maybe a third of what's available in this country. But even in this state of Massachusetts, there is room for improvement. Why do I say that? Well, let's start with obvious. Cesarean section rate. When I first came to the United States in 70s, the rate was about 5% nationwide. Now, that number is 5, 6, 7 folds, depending on where you are. Question becomes, why is it so high? Well, because it's all about money. Healthcare is about making money. And you, as a patient, as a consumer, you have to find just the right provider for your care. And unlike looking for house, car, or vacation rentals, the whole process is rather laborious, inefficient for you. Even for me, if I'm looking for a specialist, it takes me a little work to find somebody. So you say you just moved from another state into Boston area looking for a prenatal care provider. Where do you start? Do you start with a hospital? Do you start with health grades or other review site? Where do you start? Or do you start with the primary care physician? The whole process sucks. Now, I am hell-bent on making this process easier for many of you. And that platform is Doc and Dula. All of us on this Facebook are trying to make sure what you need are available. So I think Kati's available now. So I'm going to get Kati on the phone as I tell you a little bit about Kati. So, Kati, I love this music. Hey, Kati.
Hi, Bill. How are you?
Oh my God, there you are.
This I was challenged, technologically challenged, but I think we figured it out here.
Well, thank you for your time. Let me introduce Kati. Kati Fernandez. Again, I met her about a month ago when I was rounding at Winchester Hospital by accident. Somebody wanted me to make sure that I run into you. When I was rounding on your sister, we started talking about Doc and Dula, and I was just right away something about Kati that I needed to know more about. Briefly, Kati is from Dominican Republic. That's your birthplace. You
Yes.
grew up in Cambridge. Now you work as a lead content developer, ESPN Plus. Is that
Correct. Yes, I'm
correct?
director of original content development integration for ESPN Plus.
So, Katia, let's go back to that lovely island of Dominican Republic, which actually it's interesting. Half Dominican Republic, the other half Haiti. What a that's a talk about two opposite something at many levels, right?
Oh,
It's
absolutely. It's fascinating because, I very much came to this country 19 years ago when I was 8 years old, and none of those values have ever left me. And I've seen how the country has been challenged in many ways, in the same way that now we are being challenged as Americans here with immigration, and how, sharing essentially borders with other countries and what that does for the culture, what that does for how people see people. And it's just fascinating to see it on both sides.
so when you were 8, your parents just packed up and came to Cambridge.
Well, it's funny. So I come from a single parent household, Bill, and my mom is amazing. Honestly, I know you've met my sister. If you meet her, you would just fall in love with her. She's the sweetest person ever. And I think she quickly realized, when we were growing up in Puerto Plata, which is where we're from in the Dominican Republic, all my Dominicans would be ashamed. I just said it like that. It's really Puerto Plata. Um, you know, we were growing up there. My mom is half Dominican, half Puerto Rican. And so for her, she had gone to Puerto Rico. She had a sister who actually was going through domestic violence in Cambridge. And so she came to her aid, and left my sister and I back home with our grandmother. And so when she realized all the opportunities in Cambridge for us, and you know, the world really was our oyster if we were able to meet her there and be reestablished. And she knew that we'd be able to get more ahead by coming here with her than staying where we were. Like completion rates in the Dominican Republic for people that go into, college and high school is very slim. And my mom wanted better for us.
Which school did you go to initially?
In the Dominican Republic or
Oh, in
Cambridge?
Cambridge, because my kids went to school in Cambridge, you know?
Yeah, so we actually were enrolled in Amigos because Amigos is both Spanish and English.
Oh my
So
God, my twin boys are amigos.
really?
Yeah, fifth graders right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So my sister and I went to Amigos until we were in fifth and sixth grade, right? So my sister came here, she got held back. One academic year, I was in third grade, she was in fifth grade. She did fifth grade twice. And then my mom switched us over to private school and we went to St. Anthony's.
Uh huh.
And after being in St. Anthony's, we went to Cristo Rey Boston,
Uh
which
huh.
was then known as North Cambridge Catholic High School.
Mm hmm.
And then both my sister and I actually went to Holy Cross, so we're both Crusaders.
Ah, wow.
Yeah.
I had told you that my middle child plays basketball for Holy Cross alumni at
Mm-hmm.
Bremer and May. But I mean, here's two things I was just talking about my mother because my mother herself left my father because of domestic violence. And in 75, she just took two little boys, put us into a little car, and just drove away. And I said that day is the beginning of new life for my mother and us. And it was the end of my father's American dream because he never recovered. For the next
Mm-hmm.
30 years, he would be stuck in just minimum wage job, living out of a same mobile home for 30 years. But my mother raised three kids, and all of us went to become something. And my mother, just like your mother, boy, she's a survivor. I mean, no, I don't think she finished elementary school because she grew up after Korean War, but she is so resourceful.
Hmm.
and she can make things happen, And then eventually she ran a restaurant business, and she just said, "This is America. You apply yourself, you can get things done." So both you and I, very similar background, and having that role model, I think really helped me because I never looked for my father. I,
Yep.
why do I need him for? Because my mother was around. She made sure that everything I needed was there, and sounds like that was the same for you. And having that infrastructure is so vital. And the one thing I wanted to say about Latinos, your family concept is so important, right?
Oh yeah.
That's your identity, that's your support group from all the hardships in life. And whether you're from Dominican Republic or Puerto Rico or other South American countries, boy, if one of my patients, man, I better treat her well because there's a sisters, cousins, and they're all coming to me. It's it's crazy, you know?
Well, I think there's two things there, Bill, that you really said that are fascinating. Like, I think, my mom and I are only 21 years apart, right?
Hmm.
Two almost. And there's something to say about somebody who was my age and already had two little girls depending on her and the will to continue. And my mom did not play any games, Bill. She was tough on us. And if we wanted a cell phone, she would show us the cost of a cell phone. We had to get it ourselves, we had to pay for it ourselves. She became a friend after we became adults.
Hmm.
And I appreciate that. And there's a value to that because she allowed us to remain our age for as long as
Hmm.
possible and see the world in the pace in which is appropriate. And I think that's something that isn't always happening here. And the second fault about family is, growing up in an immigrant family, all you have is each other, right?
Right.
Like everything is grounded in the love and in the honor that you have in the home and that you have for each other. And so I think what that's taught me as a professional is that I therefore treat my team and anybody who is close and personal in my space as family. They're an extension of that
Hmm.
because you don't know how to love any other way.
Right.
And I see that with you because of how you treat your patients. I mean, you treated me like family because of the way you saw me treating my own sister in that one day.
Well, I got lucky. It wasn't a straight path for me to be a physician. I majored in biology, but one thing I did was I read a lot of biographies about physicians, old timers. Schweitzer, even though he's controversial, Schweitzer to American physicians, Mayo Brothers. And I was stuck in this simple concept of being a physician, help people. So I wrote that in one page essay. And to this day, I think that's what I'm supposed to do. Not about economics of being a physician, it's just helping people. And of all the specialties, what better one than to bring out a little miracle? It's a miracle every time I see it. I just don't, every time I'm part of a birth and I say, wow, how does it happen? Because I also do GYN surgery, so where I remove uterus and whatnot. How does one? It's a fascinating field, but I got lucky. And going back to mother, my mother was barely 17 when she had me. So Korean War, 50 to 53, where 5 million Koreans died. She was 8 years old when the war ended, and she survived that. And she had no prenatal care, and she had me at home with no attendant. I mean, it makes a nice story, but it wasn't that because of that I became an obstetrician. But having such role model is so vital. And my 5 kids, I always tell them, I joke and say, even though they're biracial, I say, you kids are 51% Korean. And that having that identity, and it has worked for you, and I've noticed that identity is so strong among Latinos. It's like that identifies you.
Well, you can't lose where you are because I can't lose where I came from, right? It's in my blood. And my beliefs are grounded in that. You know, like as terrible as this year could seem, Bill, to a lot of people on the surface, I hold on to the promise of the fruits and the generational curses I was coming here to break, right? My mom started breaking them. My sister and I have continued them by being the first to graduate from college here, being both, young women who have masters. And I'm not giving up on that promise of a better tomorrow for not only your kids, but for my future kids as well. Because I know that can exist because I'm 26 years old and I came from a town where my family had the first phone number, right? Where people that look just like me all have families, were married off at 13, 14, 15 years old, and that's not my story,
Hmm.
right? So I can't get lost in what I see in front of me because I've also seen the power of what's unseen, right?
So the purpose of this immigrant American is exactly that. Throughout history, there have always been horrible things happen. World War One, World War Two, Korean War, Vietnam War. Things are always happening. And what I was trying to really make a statement is, despite all that, without ignoring what's going on, I do my part by taking care of my immediate surrounding, my kids, my staff, my patients, make sure their needs are taken care of. And by doing so, I get to live out so-called American dream. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not ignoring what's happening. I will vote. I will make sure my vote is counted. I think about this and that. But right now, I'm just too darn busy doing what I'm supposed to do. And
Yep.
one of the things that really struck me with you is at your tender age of 26. At 26, I was still a resident, okay? You're, it's not that you're outspoken, but your words have forces behind it. And what kind of, um, you know, you make a great role model for my daughter, who's a senior at BU, because she's really believes in her cause. A senior majoring in anthropology, minoring in Spanish. At Was it 2 years ago? I sent her to Guatemala for the summer to volunteer at Children's Hospital. 4 years she worked at inner city programs volunteering. She worked as EMT. So she needs Katy Fernandez of the world, because she needs to see what is doable, and at your tender age. So if I understand correctly, you are in charge of what we are seeing. Is that right?
Yeah, so my role, I started built I had high dreams, but I am not as smart as you. So I wanted to be a doctor, and that is not what I am. And I actually met a Holy Cross alumni. His name is Brian Lockhart, and my senior year, him and I got paired up my junior year, leading into my senior year, and he was amazing. And he showed me that the world was greater than that, and that I could have massive impact in a lot of different areas, right? And so, coming out of college, I went to the NFL Network when I knew nothing about sports, and then I worked for myself for a little bit, and then I went to Hulu, and now at ESPN Plus, my job is really to focus on content development and the ways it impacts the business, and also in the ways that we partner across the Walt Disney Company to integrate that content. Right. So if you're watching the pay-per-view last night on ESPN Plus, you would have probably seen a spot for a new series we're working on coming out next week called UFC Declassified. So I work on that. But I think the work that I try to do, not just in the office, but the conversations I bring into the office are more powerful than the work that the world sees on the screen, right? It's the conversations about, as a multicultural woman, what does that mean? There's not nearly enough women in media, right? Especially
Hmm.
not in sports media. It's about negotiating your worth and understanding what you're valued as. I just got promoted last week and I had to argue and I blatantly told my HR department I get paid 52 cents a dollar to my white counterpart. And this is what I actually do. And I can't sit here and advocate for others if I can't properly advocate for myself.
Hmm.
And I think that's more powerful than the stuff that people see on the screen, because if I was not pushing my team to vote and fulfill their civic duty, if I was not pushing our company to fulfill the standard of what we deserve, then
Hmm.
who's going to do that? Because there's just not that many of Katis, right? There's just not
Right.
that many of us. we, especially as immigrants, we can be so thankful that we forget it's actually disrespectful what's happening.
Right.
And I've had to, this has been a pivotal part in my life and in my career where I've had to understand that, yes, I am thankful and I am blessed. And every single day, Bill, I count my blessings because we made it out. However, now I've also proven I deserve to be here. I'm not taking somebody's spot. I am a Dominican American. I'm a
Yeah.
proud Afro Latina.
Yep.
And I am a proud American. And those two things can live together.
I think for me to say I'm an immigrant American, and whether you're from Dominican Republic, Uganda, Korea, or Russia or Albania, we. Oh, is that the Sam, your dog?
That is Tom. He's making his grand debut.
Hey, there you go. We can make things better because we have different sets of eyes. We see things differently. And so much of what bothers people, for example, with me, even though I have lived here for half century, a lot of things that bothers people, it doesn't really bother me because I grew up with a curfew. I grew up with outhouse. I mean, I still go to grocery store. When you walk into regular grocery store, I am going like, wow, look at the stacks of all this fruit. And it reminds me how lucky I am. And I have a job that I really like. I have great patients who allow me to be part of their lives. And that's because I don't take anything for granted. And that's because I want to make a little difference, which is what this is about. Saying, hey, don't settle just because you're on this side of the border. You got to continue to make a difference for next generation, for my daughter, my boys, and down the road for you, your little nephew, niece coming up. And
You
we
will
can.
have to 100%. You have to be my OBGYN, Bill. That's the one
Well,
area here.
you know, and we can do better because our parents, they have paid the price.
Yeah.
How lonely must have your mother been? How lonely must have my mother been when it was hard, when they were looking for that extra change to feed us? What did they have? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But they're so happy now. They say, oh, look at Kati, look at my daughter. My mother, I was on the phone with her right before this, and she goes, son, make sure you eat. Make sure you sleep. I'm like, Ma, no, I'll always be a mother. Make sure you eat, don't skip any meals. And she said, oh, you look tired. Did you get enough sleep? Look out for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say, wow, Ma, if you did not bring me and my little brother in that car in 75, where would I be?
Yeah.
What courage at 31, Ma. What drove you to do that? How is it possible that you work 364 days out of 365? Never complain. So we continue to do, which is why I don't complain about a lot of things, because all the things we have now and the role you play, exactly, the fact that you are in that corporate structure, making a statement, will pave the way for the next generation. It'll be a little bit easier. At some point, there will be no gap. There will be no difference between you and others.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we just keep on pushing and pushing and pushing. And we'll have, next Supreme Court Justice nominee may be from Dominican Republic or South Korea for Uganda at some point. It's going to take this persistence and hard work and let people know that it is us immigrants who made this country and who will make this country even better every day.
I 100% agree. I mean, there's a saying that people always say, right? And it's, you can lead from wherever you are, right? So it takes nothing to approach things from a place of leadership and ownership and to your point, gratefulness, right? Like it's very easy to fall into a place of need. But I think for us, Bill, because we know something different, it's always from a place of gratefulness, right? Thankfulness, fulfillment. And then the other part is continuing to have the fight and the will to know that better is coming because we've seen better happen in our lives in a very short amount of time, right?
Right.
So I'm grateful for our parents and our mothers, particularly because they paved the way for you and I to be where we are today. And without them, there will be no Kati Fernandez, director. There will be no Bill, one of the best doctors in Massachusetts. And I couldn't thank them enough, honestly.
Well, we're going to have you back to tell us more stories about where you are and what you're doing. We like to finish each segment by asking you to say something positive in your native tongue.
Ooh, something positive in our native
Something
tongue.
you want to tell the younger ones.
It would be si se puede. And si se puede is yes, you can. And I hope that my life and my story is a testimony to what we desire in our hearts and in our minds being possible. And even the things that we don't desire, we don't think we deserve, we will potentially get there as well because we're hardworking, our hearts are in the right place. And the intention is not just for our own self fulfillment, but the self fulfillment of the greater good, right? And so I think what I would tell anybody that's listening is si se puede. You can get there, you can be there, you are allowed there. And together we make there better.
If you're a book, I think where you are in life right now is like the chapter one, first page. You have a long way to go there, young lady. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure I'll be in touch with you shortly. And we're going to invite you back.
Thank you, Bill, so much for having me. And I'm sorry for Psalms calling me out.
No, 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 no. It was a perfect addition. Have a good night.
Appreciate you. Have a good night.
Take care. So, another amazing story. And I can't believe she's only 26. Can you imagine being that young, being that well read, well spoken, and having such influence, not only in what we watch, but all the background work she's doing. Thank you very much for watching another episode, and we'll be back in a few days.